The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me." He replied to him, "Friend, who appointed me as your judge and arbitrator?" Then he said to the crowd, "Take care to guard against all greed. For though one may be rich, one's life does not consist of possessions." Then he told them a parable. There was a rich man whose land produced a bountiful harvest. He asked himself, "What shall I do? For I do not have space to store my harvest." And he said, "This is what I shall do. I shall tear down my barns and build larger ones. There I shall store all my grain and other goods, and I shall say to myself, 'Now as for you, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, be merry.'" But God said to him, "You fool, this night your life will be demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, to whom will they belong? Thus will it be for all who store up treasure for themselves, but are not rich in what matters to God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, dear friends, where do we place our security, or where do we find our security? That's the question that emerges from our readings this morning. We especially hear it in the gospel passage, where the Lord is critical of someone who puts too much trust in their bountiful harvest and wants to build up big barns and to enjoy life, eat, drink, and be merry. Doesn't mean that it's bad to build things and do good projects for the Lord, but to put our security in these things. This is the trap for us. Well, it's perhaps a little bit ironic because I said I was in Steubenville, Ohio for the last month leading a retreat, and this is a picture of our house in Ohio. It's an old school that we were able to purchase for a song because it was abandoned by the city of Steubenville. And then over the course of about 8 years, we've been slowly renovating it, turning the classrooms into bedrooms. And finally, the last piece to do is the chapel. This is the front side of the building. Let's see if it comes through there. There it is. So you can see the chapel still under construction, even after 8 years. It's been a long project. But here we are as Marians now, seeing this influx of seminarians and an abundance, as you will. And here we are building up a bigger house. And then in Stockbridge, at our headquarters there, many of you know and probably have contributed even to the new house that we're building there. And so we might wonder, well, are we Marians making that same mistake? Are we putting too much emphasis on the material places where we're at? And that's a temptation for all of us, I think, is to find our security in the material things, in this life. And our Lord is inviting us, place your trust instead in heaven. It is there that our treasure lies. So in order to help make that journey from the natural instinct to find security in things, and instead to transition to finding our security in God, how do we do that? Well, there are three possible responses. One is what we hear in the first reading from the book of Ecclesiastes, where we hear, "Vanity of vanities, says Koheleth, vanity of vanities, all things are vanity." And Father Mike Schmitz explains that the word vanity there really, it doesn't mean like looking in a mirror at ourselves, and thinking of ourselves so good. Rather, it's more, the meaning of the word gets at the heart, at the essence of it is like meaninglessness. So everything is meaningless, is what this author is saying. And so, yeah, that's one possibility. We can say, the world's going to pass away. All these things we're doing, they're all going to, deteriorate and collapse and all that stuff. The world will end, so therefore why bother? And that's maybe not the best response. The other, maybe the opposite extreme of that is to say, I'm going to live so much for God that I won't care at all about these material things, and I'm just going to deny myself. Deny myself, deny myself, deny myself. I'm going to fast, do extreme penances. I'm going to not have any pleasures in this life whatsoever. And there were saints in the course of the church's history who have done these kinds of things. There was St. Anthony of the Desert, who, lived in the desert as a hermit. He fled from people entirely, except he wasn't so good at it because his reputation for holiness spread, and all these other people came to be around him and to learn from him. So he wasn't the best hermit. But then there was also more extreme versions even than him. There was St. Simon the Stylite, who lived on top of a pillar in the desert for 37 years. I have no idea how he did that. But people have done some pretty extreme things to deny themselves, to put to death anything in themselves, any possibilities for attachment to things, any possibility for attachment to comforts. And how they could do that, I don't know. I know I can't do it. I have enough difficulty going without peanut butter for a few days. But there's another way, and this is a way proposed by Father Mike Gately, my novice mate in the Marians, great priest. This is his book called Consoling the Heart of Jesus. And he says that what we can do is think of a donut. And, I think about this little child with a donut here, right? Children love donuts. Understandable. Some adults do too, right? Very true, yes. Well, you can imagine that a parent in this situation is not going to get very far trying to get that donut away from that little child, right? It's going to go very badly for the adult. And, if we think of our creature comforts, attachments that we might have, anything in this world for us, if we think of it like that donut, it's really hard for us to let that go. We might we might imagine ourselves trying to pry our fingers off of that donut, but it doesn't work. It's like trying to pull a donut away from this little child. But Father Mike says, and he takes a cue from this passage that we heard in the second reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Colossians, who says this: if you are raised with Christ, so if you are baptized, seek what is above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Think of what is above, not of what is on earth. When Christ your life appears, then you will appear with him in glory. And so what is St. Paul inviting us to do? Think of heaven. Think of God. Think of these realities more than the earthly realities that we think about and get stuck on. And as we do, what happens? We marvel at the glory of God. We look to him with radiant faces, like this little child here in this scene. Can you imagine yourself like a little child just reaching up and holding the hand of God the Father? If we look at God and think of his goodness and love, we think of the beauty of heaven, then suddenly our attachments to things on this earth fade. It doesn't mean that we don't have them entirely. We might still have them. I still like peanut butter. But it has less of a hold on us because we're not so focused on the things themselves. We're focused more on the giver of the things, our Father who loves us and loves to give us good gifts. And if there are times when he takes them away from us, if we keep focusing on him and the glory of heaven that awaits, it's just a little bit easier. It doesn't make it easy entirely. It's still difficult at times, but it's a little bit easier. And so think of heaven. And one way you can do this, I've shown this in previous homilies, is this beautiful ceiling in the Church of St. Ignatius of Loyola in Rome. where the perspective there is it's as if we're looking up through the ceiling into heaven. It's such a beautiful scene, but it helps to remind us that, yes, heaven is not so far away. And imagine if we could spend even just a few minutes every day thinking, what is heaven going to be like? What is it going to be like? How glorious will it be? We had a priest in the community, actually. He died at the age of 98. In fact, he died on his 98th birthday. His name was Father Kazimierz Krzyżanowski. It's a difficult Polish name. But I knew him probably 10, 15 years even before he passed. And even back then, in his 70s, he was saying, "Oh, I can't wait to die." And he would say, "I don't know why God doesn't take me." Because his focus was so on heaven and the things of heaven and going to heaven and being, with the Lord and without pain and suffering. That was his focus. And he was just a wonderful example to us. Well, this is a lesson for all of us. And it's not easy, but it's a lesson. And our seminarians have to learn this lesson too. So here are Brother Paul and Brother Alex, whom you've met, who are helping out here this summer. And they have a little bit of a challenge too, a little bit of a stretching in this regard, because they're being asked to go to a new seminary. Actually, it's an old seminary, but it's new for us Marians. It's in California. They may have mentioned something about it, but it's St. Patrick's Seminary in Menlo Park, California. Here's where it is on the map, so you can kind of see where it is. And it's south of San Francisco and north of San Jose, so it's in the Bay Area. And it looks like this. Looks pretty nice. So I know it's going to be a real stretch for Brother Patrick and, Brother Paul and Brother Alex. And admittedly, well, here's another view of it too. So it's a pretty nice looking place. But you can imagine, if you've never been there, getting up and moving is not easy. Going to a new place is never easy. What's it going to be like? Are the studies going to be difficult? The way of life will be difficult. It could be difficult if you're accustomed to living in other places. So it can be a stretch to go to someplace new. Well, admittedly, I also have to share that with mixed emotions, I too am being asked by our provincial superior, Father Chris, to go to California with the seminarians. And so as hard as this is for me to share, there's also a little bit of joy to accompany these guys in their time in the seminary and to help them by going with them out to California. I'll also be asked to teach in the seminary out there, so it's quite an honor for me to have that invitation, although admittedly it is going to be very difficult for me to leave here. But there is good news, and the good news is that there is not a permanent replacement for me. And you might say, well, how is that good news? Well, what it means is that there's going to be a rotation of priests helping out Father Matt. And when it comes to those times of vacation from the seminary, like at Christmas time and 3 months over the summer, I'll be sent back here. So I'm not going completely away. I'm going to be here part-time, especially during the holidays around Christmas and the summer. So yes, it's still going to be difficult for me to leave, and I know it's a little bit of a stretch for all of us, but the Lord is doing good things, we trust. And why is he doing it all? Well, because, I guess he has good plans for us all, but he's also stretching us to be able to keep our gaze focused on heaven, especially in the difficulties and the challenges and the sufferings in this life, and to keep our gaze focused on, not palm trees and things like that, but even better, right? The glories of heaven, like that ceiling in Rome or this little child. So may the Lord bless us all, because we recognize all of us have our challenges. All of us have ways in which the Lord is stretching us beyond our abilities, stretching us to be able to say yes to his will when it's difficult and to accept whatever might be. And in this way, the Lord is doing great things in us. And we can say, Lord, it is in you that I place my trust, not anything on this earth. It is in you that I find my security, and help me to do so, because it's not easy. So may the Lord bless us in our journey together and help us to keep focusing on the glory of heaven that awaits.